All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going through creating a series of video presentations that are going to get us to the point where we're going to create our own website. I've done 9 presentations on the hypertext markup language, HTML, which allows you to add content to a web page. I did 8 lectures on CSS, Cascading Style Sheets, which allows you to style that content. And now I'm on my 3rd lecture on JavaScript, which is a programming language that allows you to add interactivity to a website. And I showed you in the last video examples of using strings, numbers, booleans, nulls, and undefined. And we left it off at symbols, which are basically new. And let's take a look at this. A quick overview of JavaScript symbols. This is from freecodecamp.org. They've got tons of super good videos and excellent articles too. All right. Symbols are a new primitive introduced in ES6. They're completely unique identifiers. They can be created using the factory function symbol. So we're creating a new symbol here called symbol. And if we do this, let's take a look at their example. So I'm going to get rid of the stuff we've got here. Now we talked about let, but not really at all. So we'll talk about that in a couple minutes, but I'm going to use const. All right, and then I'm going to say alert symbol. All right, let's run this. And it looks like it didn't show me anything. So let's look. Wanted that, but that's not enough to make that not work. So let's go back to our article. All right. Every time you call the factory function, don't worry about that. A new thing is created. The optional thing is a descriptive. So let's look at this. All right. We had the program out there and running. Oops. We had the program out there and running right here. What if I right mouse click and go to my inspect and go to my console? It says cannot convert a symbol to a string. Well, that's why it didn't work. But what if I come here and type in the word symbol? All right. Still didn't like it. Well, let's see if we can figure out why. All right. Every time you call this, it says, so let's see. I was under the mistaken presumption when I first started using these things that a symbol would be for creating symbols, like a plus sign, a minus sign, etc. But it's actually a fairly complex topic. As it says, they can be used to provide access to objects in here. It says it's worthwhile for all developers to know this. You know what? I'm going to hold off on that because we're not going to get into this much depth and breadth of coverage. But I do want to show you something. And it's almost, or it's at least tangentially created to what we're talking about in here. So let's forget about the symbol. And I'm going to put 3 things in here. I'm going to put const, legal age, I'm making it in uppercase on purpose, equal 21. Now I'm going to say let legal age equal 21. And I'm also going to say var. Now I can't say legal age again because I'd have 2 variables that had the exact same name. See that? Now watch when I put equal 21. It's not going to like this. So what I'll do is I'll put it like this. Now, I've got 3 things in here that I'm using. I've got one that says const, I've got one that says let, and I've got one that says var. I mean, what the heck is going on here? Well, the first one is literally a constant, which means that this cannot change while the program's running. So notice if I come in later on in my program and I type in legal age equal 18. All right, I'm going to just leave it like that. And then let's do an alert for, we'll put in legal age. All right, let's see what happens when we do this. All right, so I come in here and let's go back to our program and let's refresh. And it says, hey, you got an error here on line 29. You attempted to assign to a variable that you said was a constant. So when you create a constant and give it a value, its value cannot change. We looked at variables before, but a constant is a special type of variable. So let's go back one more time and let's look at all three of these. So I'm going to put in here a constant is a special type of JavaScript variable that once it is set, it cannot be changed. All right, so that's that first one. That's why this was illegal. If I comment out this line and save, now it should say 21, because that's what we put in there is okay. So let's go back to this, and it says 21. So that worked. All right, so let and var, what are these? Let allows you to declare a variable and optionally assign a value to it using the assignment operator. Well, that's exactly what we did here. So to say let, this part that you see in blue, that is a declaration. That is declaring a new variable called legal age. Once I come in here and do this, now I've assigned it a value. Now it is giving me not an error, but it's telling me in here, it says, hey, you might have seen that before. It says, hey, you're creating this variable and assigning it a value, but you're never using it in your program. So I could say here, constant legal age equals, and it should come back and say constant legal age equal 21. All right, totally fine. Then I'm going to come in here and say let legal age, and now it's going to also say 21. Totally fine. So constant legal age equal 21, let legal age equal 21. Well, let's make this a little bit more confusing, because now I've got var legal age, and before I explain to you what a var is, let's put in here var legal age equal that, and let's run it. So constant legal age is 21, let legal age is 21, var legal age is 21. Why all this ways to do this? Well, I already explained to you what a constant is. So for instance, a good thing for a constant would be something like this: inches in a foot, because that's not about to change tomorrow. Okay? Now, if I come in here, it says constant inches in a foot equal 12. But I still have my let and I still have my var. We're going to look at those in just a second. Now, many people will tell you that making your constants in a language like JavaScript in uppercase is old school. You know what? They're right. So why do I do it? Because what is supposed to happen when you create a constant, all right, when you create a constant and you put it in uppercase, it is at least subliminally, behind the scenes, sending a message out that, oh, That's a constant, so don't try to change its value. All right? All right, so, I mean, what are we getting to here? Well, let is the way that you are supposed to declare variables today. All right, it's the new and improved var. All right, so I'm going to put in here the same exact thing and say var allows you to declare a variable and optionally assign it a value, because that's true. All right, so here let's say let, and let's just put in here age equals 30. All right, and here we're going to put in var salary equals, and let's put in 50,000. Don't put commas in here. All right, and that'll work just fine. All right, so I can say let age, and here we'll just make that age, and var salary, and we'll make that salary. All right, and if I do this, inches in a foot works, age works, and salary works. They all work. So you might be saying, okay, that's totally fine. Why have two of these? Why have a let and why have a var? Well, it's got more depth and breadth to it that I really want to get into right now. But what I want you to understand, or what you should understand about it, is this. Don't use var. And as long as you keep that in mind, you'll be just fine. All right, just use let. It has to do with where things are defined in a program, how they're defined, and the cleaner way of doing it is to go in and use let. All right. Now I want to mention one more thing in here because I still have time. I'm only at 12 minutes, so I wanted to talk about something in here that's called the math object. All right. JavaScript has got a bunch of stuff that's built in. So I'm going to say here, let number equals, I'll say 56. There's no significance to that number. And I'm going to say, I'm going to put a bunch of alerts in here. All right, I'm just going to keep changing my alert. I'm going to say here the square root of number. So that should say the square root of 56 is, and I'm going to say math.sqrt number. And I'm going to let the system figure it out for me. So what is that going to say? The square root of 56 is 7.4833, etc. You get the idea. But what I was doing in here is I was calling the math object. This is something that exists in the language, and you may or may not have noticed this when I typed in math dot, it showed me all the different things that I can do in here. And there's quite a few of them. Now, a lot of them have to do with more like geometry, things like cosines, sines, tangents, etc. I don't care about any of that stuff. All right, but I'm going to show you a few of these. So rather than getting the square root, what's the square of 56? Okay, so what is 56 times 56? There's actually two ways I can do this, but the easiest way is to say math.pow, and I want to say number, which is 56, and in fact, let's cube it. 56 times 56 times 56. So the cube of 56, again, should be 56 times 56 times 56. Let's first use a calculator and figure that out. 56 times 56 times 56. Whoops, 56 times 56 times 56. And that's 175,616. 175,616. Well, what if we run our program? 175,616. The same answer. All right. let's look at a couple more examples of this. All right, so let's go look at 56.74935. All right, so if I change this to the number is, just like that, the number is, and I just say, I'm not going to do any math.power or anything. I'm just going to say here, number. All right, so the number is, hopefully it'll come back and say the number is 56.74935. And that's what it says. Good. So why did I do that? Well, what if I want to round that number? So I'm going to say here, math.round of number. Any guesses as to what that'll be? It says 57. Well, what did it do that for? Because I told it to round that up or down. So had this been less than 0.5, so if this was 0.44935, let's just make it 0.499999. I think this is going to come back and say 56. And it does. If I do it again, and I come back, I don't need that any longer. If I come back and again, but now I say 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 with a 1 on the end. Whoops, with just a 1 on the end like that. All right, now it comes back and it says 57. It rounds up when the decimal that you see there, so it rounds up when this is 0.5 or above, and it rounds down when it's less than 0.5. Now, what did we have in here before? We had that number, 74935. What if I want to round, but I want to round it to 2 decimal places? Then I can tell it to 2 decimal places. All right, so the number is, and what will that do? It's going to round based on these two. And then it's going to look at this and it says, is this 0.745 or above? It is. So since I'm doing it to 2 decimal places, this should give me 56.75. It didn't. It gave me 57. Okay, I'm surprised, but let's look again. All right, I'm using math.round, and I thought I was telling it to round it to 2 decimal places. But it still is treating it like 57. All right, well, let's look. How to round a number in JavaScript. All right. And there's a lot of stuff you can do in here, but let's just take a look at this. All right. The value of the given number rounded to the nearest integer. That's why that's working the way it's working. All right. So look at all these things we can use in here with math. First one is absolute value. You may or may not have heard of this before. If I say, how old are you? And you say, I'm 23. How old are you? And I say, I'm 64. There are 41 years between us, and it doesn't matter if you say 61 minus 23 or 23 minus 61. It's 41 either way. So when the sign doesn't matter, if you use ABS for absolute value, it throws away any negative sign. Again, these are all geometric, so I'm not going to talk about those. How about ceiling? It rounds the number up always to the next integer. Now that's different than what we had before. If you remember what we did before when we used the math.round, and we had this, and this was 0.44935, and we rounded it, so let's just use math.round of number. Since this is less than 0.5, this should say 56. and it says 56. On the other hand, if I come up in here and say math.ceil, C-E-I-L, that means not round it up, but if there's any decimal place in here whatsoever, how about 0.0000001? All right, and I'm asking for the ceiling. What does that give me? 57. Because as long as the number that we put in here, as long as this number was more than 0, so notice if I put 0.0 in there, what does that say? 56, which is what you'd expect. Now, what if I've got 0.999 here? You already know this. It's going to come up and say 57, right? It does. Exactly. But what if I put, instead of the ceiling, what's the opposite of the ceiling? The floor. And if I say floor, it says 56. So what ceiling does is it gives you the next highest number up. It always rounds up, regardless, as long as it's more than 0. Floor always rounds down, no matter how big the number after the decimal is. All right, so let's look at a couple more of these here. There is math.pi, 3.14, whatever, if you need to ever use that. All right. EXP is one we could have used. All right, I believe you can use that. I thought you could. You can use that. That's for Euler's number. Let's just forget about that one. All right. Floor I showed you. Notice there's an F round. That's 32-bit. We don't really care about that. There's log for logarithmic stuff. This is kind of a neat one. Math.max. All right. So let's grab this one. And I'm not going to make this a console log like they're doing because we've been using alerts. So I'm going to keep the alert in here. So I'm going to have to remove the console.log. And I'm going to put in 10 numbers. -1, 137, 486, 2,000. Put in like 10 of these. 11, 654. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This should give me the smallest number in all these. Let's say that 555 we make negative. All right. So this should say for the alert, it should come back and say, let's put it in here. The smallest number was plus, okay? And let's see what that shows us. Looks like I've got an error in my code. So we go back to the console, invalid or unexpected token. Okay, we'll have to fix that. All right, so let's fix it. Let's do the math.max first. And we're going to come in here and say, let max equal that. All right, then we're going to say this, not the smallest, but the largest number was max. We don't need this number here anymore. And we'll save. Now it says here the largest number was, and that was probably why it didn't work earlier, because I didn't put in that quote. That's probably why it didn't work to begin with. But let's take a look. And it says unexpected token. Well, I had something else wrong in there. We're going to fix it. Whoa, I don't know how I got those. There we go. Again, let's take a look at it. The largest number was 2,000. Well, is that true? far as I can tell, it is. What if instead of max, we say math.min, and we use, well, let's call it min, because it would be silly to call it max. And here we'll say the smallest number was min. All right. Well, let's look at that. The smallest number was negative 555. And indeed, that was the smallest number. So there's a lot of nice things that you can use with these math functions. All right, couple more. I already showed you math.pow. Math.random is a neat one. It's the last one I'll talk about in here. All right. By default, when you do a math.random in any language, it gives you a random number between 0 and 1. Just so you know, by default, you get that. But notice you also have one in here that says you can use get random int. What the heck is that? Well, I'm gonna grab this one. And again, because we've been using alerts, I don't need this anymore. So I'm just going to put this alert in here like this. And I'm going to say alert, get random int, and I'm going to put in here a 10. Just like that. Now watch what happens when I run the program. All right, it says get random int is not defined. All right, it wants me to do this. Let num equal get random int, like that, and then alert num. All right, now when I run this and I refresh, it says again, get random int is not defined. Well, it says I'm breaking my own rules here. Get random int. Well, let's do this, because this is what we're going to end up doing a little bit later. All right. Get a random number between 1 and 100, JavaScript. All right. Now, you don't have to worry right now about what all this means, but I'm going to say let random number equals math.floor. We're going to put 100 here, and now I'm going to say alert random number. This should, if I did this one right, generate a random number between 1 and 100. So let's look. 16, I run it again. 1, I run it again. 59, I run it again. 13, I run it again. 1, I run it again. 44, get the idea? It's a way that I can quickly generate a random number. So what I showed you in here was some of the basic math functions, and we talked a little bit about symbol, and I decided I'm not going to say anything more about symbol, at least for right now. All right. Whoa, we're way over.